Okay, my artists, today we are going to finish our story of Jacob Lawrence, talk about the rest of his life, and finish our painting we started last week in the Builders series. First, I'd like to show you one more painting in the Builders series, which I absolutely love. And it is this one. You can see this is actually Jacob working in his studio in Washington, and I'm going to explain to you about that. Here he is, and you can see there are many tools there, and how he is coming up the stairs. He's going to be working in his studio, and he is working on the series of paintings called the Builders series. I want to show you a couple of photographs of him. I know I've shown you a few, but I'd like to show you some more photographs of him. Here is one when he was a younger man, and he was actually working on the Migration series. Here he is working on the Migration series. He mixed all his own paints. He did not buy commercially produced paints. He made them all himself. We've made our own paint. And don't forget, you can do that with all colors. And using Jacob's method of painting, you can do that because remember, he worked one color at a time. So you could make a batch of egg tempera, paint one color, and on another day make a new batch in another color and complete your entire process that way. One more photograph I'd like to show you of him in his studio in Washington, in Seattle, Washington. And here he is working on some more of those Builder series. And you can see that he's only painted one color in all of these, and he starts with his favorite, that being black. Jacob Lawrence was very fortunate. He was very successful in his life. And we found out that at first he felt guilty about that. But then his doctors helped him to understand, you know, that life, you never know how life is going to turn out. And some people are lucky. There were at least 1,000 other black artists who were at least as good as he was. But he got the breaks. And that was nothing to feel guilty about. That was just the way his life went. Now, Jacob had continued to paint and was so recognized across the United States in the 1960s and the 1970s that he was invited by colleges all over America to come and teach workshops. He became an artist in residence, kind of like what I've been doing with a different group of artists for the last 35 years. He became the artist in residence and worked from one college to another college, offering different courses in painting, and I am sure telling his own story along the way. Remember, Jacob is a storyteller. And I think you remember I said in the 1960s, during the fight against discrimination in our country, many of its leaders came to him and said, "You are a black man, you are a famous black man, and you should be fighting for black rights. We are in the middle of a civil rights movement. You have got to show our struggle." But you know, Jacob had a different kind of character. In his art, he didn't want to show the struggle. He didn't want to show the fight. He wanted to show the building of community. And that's how he came to start his building series. In the 1970s, having gone back and forth across the United States, teaching at different colleges, he was approached by the University of Washington in Seattle, Washington. They said, "You are such a fabulous teacher. We would like to have you on staff all the time. We want to give you a teaching job." Ooh. Well, that was an interesting thought for he and Gwen, because he and Gwen had never lived outside New York City. They had traveled, They had traveled to many places, but they had never lived outside New York City. So there they are on the edge of the continent, facing the Atlantic Ocean, and suddenly he gets the opportunity to go live on the edge of the continent, facing the Pacific Ocean, clear across the United States. He was kind of reluctant. It was a whole different kind of lifestyle. New York was fast and happening all the time. Seattle was more laid back, more of a quiet place to be. Well, he and Gwen looked at each other. They had made him a really nice offer, and then they decided if they didn't like it, they could always move back to New York. And so, with a deep breath, they packed up everything they owned, and they moved to Seattle, Washington, where Jacob became a member of the teaching staff at the University of Washington in Seattle. If you're fortunate enough to go to Seattle, go to the museum there. You will see many of Jacob's paintings in person. Well, they said they'd do it for 2 years and see what happens. And after 2 years, they said they'd do it for 2 more and see what happens. And don't you know, in the end, Jacob continued to live there for the rest of his life. Isn't that something? He and Gwen settled into Seattle, and they loved the lifestyle, so they stayed. Jacob taught at the university and continued in his building series. I wish we had the time that I could show you so many more of his paintings, but you can go online and look at them yourselves, and you can see that at the end of his life, once he'd settled into Seattle, he was still painting the same way, using the same materials as he had been using way back when he was 13 years old and he had arrived at the Utopian Children's Center. Isn't that something? He never changed his style. He never changed his methods. He never changed his media. Tempera on paper, which, like I said, he made himself. Now, Jacob continued working on this Builders series and did some amazing pictures. And today, I want to go ahead and start coloring in our own. Near the end of his life, when he was in his 80s, he had started a whole new series of paintings. Because remember, Jacob's a storyteller. And he wanted to tell the stories that affected his life, his people, his life. And at the end, in his late 70s, early 80s, he began a brand new series called the University Series. And I think he was going to talk about all the schools that he had ever taught at. But you have to remember that when Jacob works, it is slow and meticulous. You know, it's a funny thing, class. There are a lot of artists who say, a painting a day. In order to be a good artist, you have to do a painting a day. Nice, if you have the time. And if you have that kind of style. For Jacob, it was much more meticulous. He spent weeks and months working on a single image, slowly, meticulously, accurately drawing his lines and his shapes to make his simple geometric pictures. And one was never enough to tell the story. So in a series, he would draw 40, 50, in the Migration series, there are 60 separate paintings. And he drew them all first. And he had them all laid out exactly the way he wanted them before he ever started to paint. So it's not surprising that his Builders series took him over 10 years to complete. And remember what he's building. He's not just building tables or buildings. what his pictures are really talking about, the story he really meant to share, was about building community and his firm belief that all people could work together to make a better world. You know, after the 70s, it seemed that that's where we were going, that civil rights and the civil rights movement had made great progress in the United States of America. And there was a better world for all people after the civil rights movement of the 60s. We had many black heroes come out of that movement. John Lewis, who started out as a laborer, became a senator in the United States government, and he held that until he died. There are so many people who worked hard to make our country a better place to live in. But unfortunately, here in 2020, we have found that there's still a lot of pain. There are still a lot of problems. We still have a lot of work to do before we get to that beautiful place where we all live happily together. You've seen it, I know, the signs about kindness. Kindness being contagious. Taking the time to know and understand a person or a people and not making judgments. It's hard, but if we continue to do this work, we will continue to create a better world for our children and the children who come after. All right, I should tell you that Jacob Lawrence died in the year 2000 in Washington at the age of 82 years old. He had had an amazing life. He had seen so many changes in this country. From a time when black people were not allowed to drink out of the same water faucets as white people, eat in the same buildings, use the same bathrooms, to gaining the vote, to gaining respect, to gaining education. It was an amazing time, and we continue. All right, here's my picture from last week, and here we go. I'm going to start with my favorite, well, his favorite. I can say, I'll tell you honestly, my favorite color, the black. And I'm going to go through and choose carefully the areas that I want to have in my picture that are going to be black. Now remember that the best way to make your composition strong and powerful is to triangulate. Work in that magic triangle. So I'm going to start by coloring in a few of the things that I know I want to be black in my picture. I know I want my eagle's eye to be black too. And I think I'm even going to trace around the edge of it. I am using my black marker. If you want to use crayons or colored pencils, those will be fine. This is the closest thing I have available to tempera paint, since I have not made any new color. Okay, and a shoe underneath the table. Now I want you to notice that in my picture, my black moves around my picture plane. Not all the black is on one side. The black kind of moves around and keeps us focused on the picture. Now my next color I'm going to use is my brown. That means I have to be able to color in all the brown areas before I go any further with another color. So here is my worker, my first worker, my builder. Building community. That's what Jacob wanted. He wanted to build community. He's going to have a beautiful brown hand. Can you see my, I don't know if you can see this or not, because I drew in crayon. When I put my watercolor marker on top of the crayon moves the color marker to one side, so I can actually see some of the, okay, I'm going to have a brown table leg here. This was supposed to be a table leg too, wasn't it? So I'm going to make this brown as well. I'm going to give it a little bit of texture because look, I've got my brown hand right next to my brown wood. But see, I can make texture in my color by not coloring it in solid, so that then we can kind of keep the idea that that is a piece of wood in his hand. I've got another table leg here. I'm going to not color it in totally so I get an idea of texture in my wood. And then of course I have my eagle peeking in from outside. And eagles are brown. They have white heads. And I'm leaving a little bit of white spaces in my brown so that we can see his wing marks. Because remember, he's the symbol of our country. The bald eagle, the symbol of our country. And so look at this bald eagle looking in on community. Okay, now observe that my brown now moves around the picture plate. This is what we want. We want to see that brown moving around just like the black did. Now I'm going to my red. And I'm going, oh, this is the one that's fading. Let's see if I've got another one here. You want it to, oh, this isn't very good either. Do you notice that with your colors, you use them and they wear out? Oh well, gonna have to buy more. Again, I want to try and triangulate with this color. So in order to get that sense of a triangle here, I'm going to come over here and give this worker a red shirt. And if this is my triangle, it's going to come down here. It's going to need to come down here. One of the things, let's see, how about some red wood? The wood could be painted, couldn't it? In fact, I think I'm going to make both of these red pieces of wood shapes. All right. And so there we go. I've got a triangle bringing this toward the center. Now I'm going to come over here. Oh, wouldn't it be fun if my other worker had red hair? Yes. You know I like that idea. I'm giving him red hair. All right, that's changing my triangle a little bit. You still see the triangle, but now it can be a triangle this way, can't it? Yeah. Now I'm done with my red, but I'm going to need some peach skin for my worker over here. So that's orange. He looked like he wasn't feeling too well if he had orange skin. Let's try the, oh no, that is peach. All right, so I've got my peach skin for my other worker. That looks pretty good. And then I think I'm going to go to my blue. Now I'm going to use blue in my picture. So that means I've got to color in all the areas. Here's one arm and his pants. I'm going to be tricky, I think. I think I have two different kinds of blue. Oh rats, I don't. So I'm going to do the rest of his shirt, but I'm going to do this a little lighter in front so that we see a difference in the two kinds of color of blue. So even though this is a watercolor marker, I can still adjust my color by pressing more or pressing less, right? Okay. So I'm going to give this guy, this worker, his blue pants. And then I'm going to go out here into the sky and make the sky blue outside the window. You get to do yours any way you want to. But what I just wanted you to see is how you triangulate colors. I continue to work in that idea of a magic triangle so that when I am finished, all my colors all the way around create a balance. And when you have that balance, your picture is more interesting to look at. We have a few more minutes left. I've pretty much told you the story of Jacob Lawrence. Let me show you some more of his Builder series. Now here's one that's really interesting. It's in the Builder series, but it's not exactly about builders. It's called Supermarket Meats. So check it out. Here are all these workers working together, these butchers, to cut the meat to sell at the grocery store. Are they working together? Notice carefully, please. Again, he's got a limited palette. I see red, I see blue, I see beige, I see brown, gray, black. And remember, the brown, gray, and black don't really qualify as colors because they are tertiary. Look at the balance. Look at the way. And then notice how he's used a white line drawn that kind of connects one group to the other group. At first, when people looked at his pictures, they thought Jacob's pictures were naive. Did I tell you that? Naive, like a child had drawn them. But when people really started looking, they realized how technical his drawings were. He put a lot of work into these, and they stopped calling them naive. Look at this builder picture. And this one. People working together to get the job done. That was so important to him. It was more important than talking about riots. It was more important than talking about the cruel things that people were doing to each other in the world. He wanted to talk. Look here. Look at this wood. Notice how there's dark wood and light wood. Notice the man who is sitting there so tired, working so hard. He's just as brown as the rest of the background. He's a little hard to see. He's having such a hard day trying to get it all to fit together. You know, it's such a wonderful analogy for life, getting the pieces to fit together in building a table, just like getting the pieces to fit together in building community. He did do many pictures to talk about what was happening in the civil rights movement, but look at the way he talks mostly. Here he has people praying together. Isn't that beautiful? Praying together in an attempt to help people work together. You can see the soldier off to one side. He's standing there with a helmet, and you can barely make out that he is holding a gun. There were lots of guns that were present. But do you see, he's not showing a lot of violence. He's showing people who are together. He didn't want to show the violence that his organizers were trying, or the organizers were trying to get him to show. This painting is called Two Rebels. It is about the civil rights movement of the 1960s. You can see the policemen if you look carefully, and you can see the two rebels who are there standing up for right. for what was right. Jacob Lawrence was an amazing artist. He was not afraid to say how things were, but he didn't want to focus on violence. He wanted to focus on community. He wanted to tell a story. He wanted to tell the story of community. He wanted to show his people how important they were in the history of our country, and he wanted to show all people how important it was to work together. All right, that concludes our story. Finish your painting. I'm going to finish mine, and I'll post it when it's done. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I hope I get to talk to you again. Maybe about another artist next time. Keep going, keep making art, and have a good day.